Are men leaking their energy on you? Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I want to talk a little bit about men staring at women versus men leering at women. This has actually been a really hot topic on social media because there has been this trend going on where women have been filming, I guess, themselves originally at the gym and then catching on camera a guy checking them out and then publicly posting that video and having everybody shame them for looking at a woman at the gym. And this has apparently become this big trend, and you see a lot of men being really upset, like, okay, so I guess we have to keep our eyes closed at the gym because we don't want to be publicly shamed for accidentally looking at a woman. And there are a lot of women who are like, why can't men keep their eyes to themselves? And what, I mean, there's this whole drama going around about this. So I want to take this opportunity to break this down a little bit. And I touched on some of this as far as like men staring at women and the comfort level with that and stuff in my Milena breakdown. So if you want to check out that video, I dive into this topic a little bit in that video. But I'm going to talk about this specifically kind of from this perspective of this like men looking at women in the gym and stuff. It could really be anywhere. I'm just going to use the gym as an example because that seems to be a hot topic nowadays. First, I want to state that I'm old school because I'm old. So I'm not a fan in general of this idea of like filming someone on camera without their consent and then publicly posting it on social media. I know there's a lot of people that are going to argue that, hey, you're in a public space and this and that. I don't know. I'm just not a fan of putting things like that out there without people's permission. I remember a time before social media. I know that was a long time ago, but I do remember a time before social media. So that's just not my thing. And honestly, like even back when I had more of a lingerie Instagram and I used to get a lot of really creepy DMs from guys, and sometimes I would post the DMs really just to kind of make them into something funny or entertaining, but I would always hide the guy's like name and account or something, because even though they were blocked or something like that, like I did not want to publicly share a man's handle. For me, I just didn't feel right doing that. And I did even have men who would message me and be like, you should be putting these guys' accounts on here so like we can go after these guys who are harassing you or who are sending you lewd messages or something like that. I was like, you know what, that's just not my thing. And there are some women out there who do want to call men out. I do think there is something to the idea that if you yourself put something on social media, myself included, like you leave yourself open to people critiquing things, criticizing you. I mean, you leave yourself open to those kind of things. So that is a little bit different to me than somebody who's just sort of like randomly out there filming somebody and decides to put their face on social media to kind of like publicly shame them. For a lot of different reasons. Like for one, if you don't know this person especially, you don't know their story, you don't know their background. There's a lot of reasons why people's faces don't want to be public. In some cases for safety reasons. You don't know what public scrutiny is going to do to somebody and you know their mental health state. We could all universally as a society use more compassion towards each other, like men and women. We could use a lot more compassion. That said, there is a lot of violence out there towards women from men. And as women, I'm not saying that we can't speak up, but we also have to be careful about how we instigate things. And I know this is like a tricky area, but especially like we throw around the word narcissist a lot in this society, and as somebody who's done a lot of research and actually had a lot of experience with people who have narcissistic personality disorder, publicly shaming or humiliating somebody who may be on the narcissism spectrum or may end up being a sociopath or something is putting you in a very dangerous position, especially if this is somebody like that you've seen in everyday life, so you know that they're in your neighborhood. They might be able to find out where you live, where you're from. Like, I'm not justifying that anybody behave that way. However, in a world today where you have a lot of people who are very unstable, like it's okay for you to come online and say, hey, I was made very uncomfortable at the gym, somebody did this, hey guys, don't do this. But to actually like publicly shame someone, you potentially could be poking the bear in putting yourself at risk. You could also be, you know, potentially putting this other person in harm's way if, you know, you don't know. There might be reasons why their face on social media is not safe. They might be dealing with their own mental health issues, and this situation that you think is just to make a point for likes and is going to set them off. And I know we can't always tiptoe around everybody's triggers and traumas, but we can also not intentionally harm each other like just for likes and attention. And I'm going to speak to the women here because it is women who tend to be putting up these videos. This is true for men if you're doing the same thing, but if you want to make a point about something, that like a certain behavior is wrong or something is wrong or things like that, because you genuinely believe that what someone is doing is wrong, or you genuinely believe that something needs to be changed or something needs to be made different, all for that, speak your truth. If you truthfully, and you're gonna ask yourself this honestly, if you're doing this just for likes and attention, not saying everybody is, I'm just saying important to check in with yourself. In fact, I think it's important for everybody to check in with themselves. If you are gonna post something that you know is gonna get attention, something you know that might be controversial, I think it's really important to ask yourself, am I posting this because this is actually my truth, because I think this is important, because I think people need to speak about this, or am I doing it just because it's controversial for likes and attention? I notice this too in a lot of spaces, and I know I'm kind of getting off topic here, but I notice this in a lot of spaces where I'll have people say like, I trigger people, like trigger warning, I trigger people, and then they literally just say things just for the sake of triggering people. And it's like, do you even believe that? Like, is that even your truth? Like, there's a difference between somebody who actually wants to speak their truth, wants to make a point, wants to make real change in the world, and somebody who just likes to trigger people or likes to instigate things for attention. Two different things. Now, I'm not saying that every woman that shared a video of a man looking at them or whatever, I'm not saying that they all did it just for likes and attention. In some cases, some of the ones that I saw clearly is just for likes and attention, and that I think you need to kind of check in with yourself and really like examine your life if you're literally just doing things for likes and attention. In some cases, I do think that some of these women were sharing these things because they actually were uncomfortable and, you know, wanted to make a point. Whether or not you agree with whether they did that the right way or not, I have more respect for somebody who's going to do something from a genuine place where they believe what they're doing is the right thing in that moment than somebody who is just going to do this thing for likes and attention. They're two different things. You can disagree with what it is that they're doing, but, you know, one is much more genuine than the other. So I just wanted to make those distinctions. I would say in most cases, I don't know about every case, but in most cases where I saw the men in the gym that were looking at a woman or noticing a woman, in most cases of the ones that I saw, it was pretty subtle. Like, it was a pretty subtle glance or a look. Some of them maybe looked a little bit too long, but none of them really seemed like they were leering or harassing. Now, there is a video that was going around, or there might be a couple videos going around, of a man who was actually like harassing a woman at the gym. I've seen one where the woman didn't put the man's face on, they just heard the conversation, which I think is a little bit different because you are hiding the person's identity. She was trying to make a point about how inappropriate it was, and he was being very inappropriate the way he was talking to her. I'm not exactly sure what the policies are in most gyms as far as, you know, harassment or anything like that. I would hope that, especially if you're paying to be there, that most gyms would have a policy where if you told somebody that worked there that somebody was harassing you, that they would have some kind of a way of stepping in. Because people really should be able to go to a gym and not feel like they're being harassed by somebody. And this is a little bit off topic from what I wanted to talk about in the video, but I'm gonna make a note about this. There's two aspects to this, right? If we're actually talking about a man who is approaching a woman, I'm gonna get into the looking thing in a minute, but we're actually talking about a man who is approaching a woman and talking to her. There's two things that we have to remember when it comes to male-female mindset and communication. Women are much more wired for subtlety. Women are much more wired for picking up on energies, shifts in expression, things like that. It's actually a survival skill, and you see it in human infants. Female infants actually are much more responsive to changes in people's facial expressions, people's energies, and things like that than male infants are. As a woman, you may think that you are expressing to a man that you're uncomfortable or you're uninterested. However, we have to, as women, keep in mind that most men do not have the same ability to pick up on those things as women do. So as women, we need to be much more clear and direct with men. We don't have to be rude. I mean, I know as women sometimes we get like, oh, we want to be the good girl, I don't want to be rude or something like that. Or we reject that and we get like overly rude and angry at a man or something like that. We have to own that as women, we are better at picking up on those things than men are. We really have to be able to be clear and direct and not think that, oh, well, I'm giving off a vibe that I'm not interested, so he should just know. Most men are just not, they're not biologically programmed to pick up on those subtleties as much as women are. I really do think that men and women, they kind of got to meet each other in the middle, right? As men, you need to pay more attention to the signals that a woman is giving off. Like, is she being very closed off to you? Is she Is she acting like she's uncomfortable around you? And I think sometimes with men, and I understand, like, your ego can get in the way and you can be like, oh, I'm gonna make this woman like me. Like, she just doesn't know me yet. Like, I'm gonna make her like me. If a woman is clearly showing signs that she's not interested, as a man, it's important to back off. And again, I know as men, it's more difficult for you to pick up on those things in a woman if she's being too subtle, because she may assume that you know what signal she's giving off and you don't actually know. But as men, if you are talking to a woman and paying attention to a woman, you need to be present and alert enough to pay attention. Like, okay, is she shutting down? Is she shutting off? Is she acting like she's trying to get away from me? Is she closed down? Does she seem uncomfortable? You know, if she does not seem interested or not seem like she's being receptive and responsive to your advances, you might just want to back off, right? You know what I mean? Like, I know sometimes the ego can kick in where you feel like it's a rejection, but in reality, guys, it may just not be about you. Like, you know, she may already be in a relationship, or she may have, you know, other stuff going on, or, you know, at a certain point, and I see this happen sometimes, unfortunately, where guys get the no, but they keep going because they're like, no, I can make that no a yes. And you get that competitive edge in you comes out, and it's important to, when you get the no, you gotta honor the no, right? It's important to really pay attention to, like, am I making this woman really uncomfortable? Because if I am making this woman uncomfortable, I either need to back off or I need to change directions here, right? And that's important. If you want to embody the masculine, right, then you have the direction. If you're approaching a feminine woman, she has the responsiveness. Her responsiveness is supposed to inform your direction. So if you go to her and her response is like she's responding, like, even energetically, like she's like backing away from you, that needs to inform your direction and what your next move is. And if you're not able to like tune into that with a woman, you're not able to be present enough with a woman in order to pay attention to her responsiveness, you're gonna have a really hard time, if she does say yes, actually being in a relationship with her. And as women, we need to make sure our responsiveness is clear. We need to make sure that the way we're responding to a man's direction is clear. There's a both and here, right? Like, there's a both and when it comes to this kind of dynamic. So let's talk about looking versus leering. It is normal for a man to look. I don't love saying that. As a woman, I don't love saying that. It is normal. Men look at attractive women. Men notice attractive women. That said, the look is normal. It's a reflex. It's what you do after the look that's the key, right? And this is actually something that David Deida talks about in a lot of his works. If any of you are familiar with the works of David Deida, he wrote The Way of the Superior Man, and he has a lot of other amazing books. He talks about that as like leaking, as a man's leaking energy. So if as a man, you see an attractive woman, you look. Normal, reflex. Women might get uncomfortable with that, we may not like it, but it's normal. After you notice and you look, it's that next second, if you latch on, that determines whether or not you're grounded in your masculine. Because when you're in your masculine, you look, you notice, normal. If you look, you notice, and then essentially you start leaking your sexual energy out at her. So now you're hooked into her. You're like, oh, well, I like that about her. Well, I like that about her. Well, I could do, and you start sexually fantasizing about her. Mind starts going places and stuff. You're leaking your energy onto her. As a man, when you're leaking that sexual energy, it makes you weaker. It makes you a weaker man. It's gonna make you much less attractive to a woman. Like, much less attractive. That like leaky sexual energy, the woman you're looking at for sure, if you're with a woman in a relationship with her, definitely for sure, like it's that leaking energy that's happening. There's actually in many cultures, like in Taoist traditions, they actually believe that it's wrong to fantasize about someone if you don't have their consent. Like even a fantasy about somebody without their consent is actually like hooking into their energy without getting their permission. Say you're a man, let's just say you're not involved with somebody or whatever like that, so we'll keep that separate for now. You see a woman, you notice her. Normal. And what I've seen in a lot of these videos are examples of men who are noticing a woman. Normal. If you notice the woman and then now you're like hooked into her energy, she's gonna feel very uncomfortable with that. It's gonna make her feel really, really, really grossed out. Even if it's just happening in your head, she's gonna feel it. She's not really gonna know why necessarily. She's just gonna be like, I'm uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable. It can be subtle. You may not even think that you're showing anything. It may all just be happening in your head. Now, some men are very expressive with that. I've seen it happen. It's happened to me. Some men are very into expressing their attraction. Some men, it's just a blank stare. As women, if we can feel that you're like leaking that sexual energy on us, you're not going to be very appealing because you're going to feel like a weak man. It's gonna feel like it's weakened you. And as women, we wanna feel your strength. So you're gonna feel weaker. It's also gonna make us feel uncomfortable because we're gonna feel like we're being used, essentially. I mean, that's really what it is. Like, you're energetically kind of using us to cultivate your own sexual energy, and we haven't really given you permission to do that. So that's where it gets uncomfortable, right? It's like the look is normal, the leak is not, right? It's the look is normal, the leering, the fantasizing, everything, because it's weakening you. And I understand there's biology going on here, but as I've said in many other videos, if you as a man are a slave to your biology, you're not gonna feel like a trustable, stable, masculine partner. And we do have a society where we're really conditioning men to be leaky. I mean, the porn culture and, you know, our entire social media and everything. I mean, men basically have, like, you know, their phone is just like this, like, walking porn menu right in front of them. And, you know, men have been conditioned from young boys to have this very leaky energy. It's one of the reasons why so many women don't feel safe around men. I mean, men in general, but especially men looking at them, because so many men are embodying this leaky energy. If men don't really start to work on that, women are not really going to feel safe. And unfortunately, as much as I don't really agree with this, like, posting these things online, that leaky energy is gonna make women uncomfortable. If you are a man who's in a relationship with a woman, I don't know if men really fully understand this. For a woman, if she is in a relationship with a man, if she's in love with a man, if she loves a man, so her heart feels connected with his, a glance, a look, it can be completely subtle, but just that subtle look at another woman will cause physical pain in her body. It's usually like in her heart, sometimes in her stomach area, but like it will cause physical pain in her body. I mean, it can actually even happen just if a man glances at the TV. Like, when a woman loves a man and she feels connected with him, any shift in his attention away from her is going to hurt her, especially if it's another woman. And that's a whole biology in itself. I talk about that more in my Milena breakdown, but literally a man looking at another woman actually engages a woman's biological fear that if that man leaves her, then her and her children or her future children or something are going to be left for dead. It's a biological response. Now, in the same way that men should be beyond their biological urge to just procreate with anybody, women do need to get past that biological, like, fear that, oh my god, if this man looks at another woman, I'm gonna be left for dead. Like, we have to get past that. That said, if you're with a man and he looks at another woman and you feel that pain in your body, which is normal, if he then starts leaking and leering, that pain is gonna get more intense. And now you as a man are looking and leaking at another woman, and the woman who you are with, say you're in love with or feel like you're in love with, you're literally like stabbing her with pain. And there is a reflex to men looking at another woman. However, there's responsibility that men have in actually being in control of their urges, desires, things like that, because it does affect everybody around them. Now, there is another aspect to this discussion. I've seen a lot of people talk about the fact that in the gym, these women who are being looked at by men are wearing very skimpy outfits at the gym, which has become kind of the norm now, and that these men are looking because these women are in these skimpy outfits. There's a few different aspects to this and ways that we can look at this. From a personal perspective, as somebody who has always, at every weight and size that she's ever been, is very well endowed, if you couldn't tell, I have never lived in a world where I could just wear a sports bra and just that out in public. And the fact that there are women out there who can just wear a little lycra top out in public and just be fine, you just live in a different world than I do. I can't pull that off. I can't. I would injure myself and others if I tried doing that, especially at the gym and I was working out. It just wouldn't happen. So I'll just get that out of the way. There is something to the argument that you're at the gym, you're sweating, you may not want to wear a ton of clothing. I understand that. This is a slippery slope, but I do want to bring up a few things that I think we need to think about if we are going to live in a society together, you know, men and women, is, for one thing, look, I believe people should do what they want with their bodies. Freedom of expression, and it's your body. I'm also somebody who feels like, I don't really need to see your butt cheeks hanging out of your shorts while I'm in the supermarket. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to see that either. I'm like, hey, you can do what you want. You can put what you want on your body, but also, like, you know, I don't need you dressing like you're at a strip club just, you know, to pick up groceries, right? I do have some concerns when I start hearing men say things like, well, if women don't want the attention, they shouldn't dress like that. The problem with that argument is it's a weird line as to, like, what is considered, like, slutty and what is considered just sexy and what is considered to be modest. And the problem with that is there's really no universal idea of that, and a lot of what that means really depends on the individual woman. It depends on whether or not a man is attracted to a woman. I mean, there could be two women who wear the exact same outfit. One woman a man is just more attracted to than the other woman. He's gonna say that with the woman he's attracted to is more sexually distracting than the other one, but they're wearing the exact same thing. As somebody, again, who has grown up very well endowed from a very young age, I can wear the same thing that another woman who has a smaller bust can wear, and what I'm wearing could be considered slutty and what she's wearing could be considered classy. There's a lot of gray area there, and I get very worried when I start seeing men start throwing in this idea of like, well, if women don't want attention, they shouldn't dress like that. I can get into some dangerous territory. There is also something to the idea that as a woman, you do have the right to, at least in, you know, most Western cultures, you have the right to choose what it is that you wear. We don't have the right to control how other people respond to what we wear. So if you do wear something skimpy and you are dressed sexy, we can't control how other people respond to us dressing a certain way. All we can do is choose how we dress, choose what we wear, and carry ourselves in a certain way and own it. Would it be nice if we could choose how people responded to us? It would be wonderful, but we just don't have that ability. All we can do is control ourselves. It doesn't mean that a man has a right to disrespect you. It doesn't mean that a man has a right to do anything to you. But we as women don't have the ability to control how men are going to respond to what it is that we're wearing, as far as whether they look, whether they leak their energy on us, whether they fantasize about us, whether they treat us differently. I mean, again, if it's a crime, like, he has no right to assault you. He has no right to, I mean, even if we're talking about a sexual harassment situation, if we're talking about some legal stuff, that's different. If we're just talking about human interactions, we don't have the ability to control how men are going to treat us. So for women, again, I'm not here to tell women like, oh, you have to cover up, oh, you have to look a certain way, but we also have to accept the fact that how we present ourselves is going to affect how the world sees us. That's just the way that life is. There's a both and there, right? And if you as a woman, you want to wear your Lycra sports top and your booty shorts to the gym and work out, you have a right to do that. You're not going to be able to control how every man is going to look at you and whether or not he's going to look at you in a way that you want him to look at you when you are dressed like that. But I gotta be honest with you, I was in a situation in downtown Boston where I ended up locked out of a parking garage in the middle of the night. I was like desperately trying to like call for help or something, and 5 different cars pulled up and asked me how much because they thought I was a hooker. I was wearing a puffer jacket, jeans, and snow boots. So if a man is gonna sexualize you, he's gonna do it, and it's not always tied to just how much clothing you're wearing. But as women, we do have control over how much clothing we wear. We don't have control over how people respond, but we do have control over what it is that we wear. There is something to the idea that if women are very comfortable at expressing their bodies, it makes a woman's body less taboo, and it will make men less like needy and desperate for like, oh my god, look, there's a little peek of skin, oh my god, it's a, I mean, and I know that there's a flip side of looking at that, right? We start getting into women and women's clothing and how women should dress. We're opening up a pretty big can of worms, and we have to be really careful at like which direction we're gonna go in with this stuff. I would also say that too, somebody said this to me at one point, and I was really triggered by it at first. So ladies, when I say this, if you get triggered, please know I was there too, and it's taken me a while to really kind of come to accept this fact. When we connect to our feminine energy, particularly to our sexuality, we have a responsibility with that. I know it can be really tempting in the concept of this like women's liberation and this idea of, you know, the culture we're in and promiscuity and things like that, for us to be like, we should be expressing our sexuality, and if anyone that can't handle our over sexuality, then it's their problem. And like, it can be really tempting to want to just like hit everybody over the head with your sexuality, especially if it's been suppressed. Believe me, I've been there. I spent many years suppressing my sexuality, and it just like totally came out in this absolute rebellion of having a lingerie Instagram where I was just basically like throwing my sexuality at everybody. And to be totally honest with you, in that time, I was still very disconnected from my sexuality. It was just me desperately trying to figure things out. So I get it. Like, I'm not here to shame or judge anybody for the choices they're making, but it was something that actually was presented to me while I was on my feminine energy journey that was, as women, we have a responsibility to use our sexuality in ways that are going to be loving towards the world and not in ways that diminish the world, right? And it can be really tempting as women when we do tap into our beautiful sexuality, because it's been so suppressed for so long in many of us. It can be really tempting to feel like we want to express that sexuality all the time with everybody. Like we want to be in that juicy sexuality like all the time and share it with everybody, and like in some ways use it to get male attention. Like even if we're complaining about the male attention, we're kind of doing it to get the male attention, and sometimes even to get the male attention to then complain about the male attention because we get addicted to the victimhood. I'm not saying every woman does that, but that is something that some women do. I've been guilty of it before, so I'm not judging. I'm just saying there is something to be said for, as a woman, when you do connect with your sexual energy and your sexuality, that comes with responsibility. In the same way that when men connect to their masculine energy, they have to have a capacity for violence. I talk about this in other videos, but they have to have a certain capacity for violence. But they have a responsibility to know when that violence is appropriate to use and when that violence isn't appropriate to use. When am I using my violence for a greater good to protect? You know, to protect and serve, essentially. Like, when am I using that in a way that is actually helpful and a gift to the world? And when am I using that in a way that is only serving my own ego? In the same way, when women connect to their feminine energy and they connect to that beautiful, sacred sexuality, as women, we also have a responsibility to know when expressing that sexuality is actually in the best interests of the world, it's actually bringing something positive into the world, and when it's actually just serving our own ego, or when it's actually being used to harm someone when it shouldn't be used to harm someone. It's a responsibility we have as women. I mean, men, when they connect to their masculine energy, have a certain responsibility that comes along with that, and when women connect to their full feminine energy, we have a certain responsibility that comes along with that too. Are the natural gifts that our core energies are bringing to the world, are they serving the world in a positive way? Are they serving love? Or are they actually serving our ego? Are they serving our selfish needs? Are they serving our need to hurt or destroy? And those are questions to ask. Now, what the answer is going to be and how that gets expressed is going to vary. And I'm not here to tell you how to do it specifically, because it's your individual journey. However, it is important for women to keep that in mind. That if we do go out into the world and we're like, hey, I'm going to be fully expressed in my sexuality, we have a responsibility to express that sexuality in a way that is going to bring more positivity to the world and not to be destructive to people, to harm people. There is also something to the fact that many women go out expressing their sexuality, but they have a lot of insecurities and they haven't fully dealt with that. So they do go out and express their sexuality, maybe by wearing a provocative outfit or something, but because they're still insecure and they're uncomfortable, any little glance from a man or any little attention you get is going to be like, ooh, I don't want that, and then you're going to shame him, when in reality it's your discomfort with the situation is also within you, and it's your insecurity to work through. And that maybe this man's behavior, provided he's not doing anything that's actually like illegal or harassment or something, that his response to that, it just might not be your concern. Your concern might be like, hey, this man giving me attention because I look beautiful is making me uncomfortable. Why is it making me uncomfortable? Is it my own insecurity? Is there something I need to work on within myself? Nothing I say is meant to excuse actual harassment, physical attacks, or physical assault, or anything like that. And again, like I said, men need to work on that leaky energy. They need to work on that like leaky, needy, sexually undisciplined energy. Super important. As women, we also need to work on being comfortable connecting to our sexuality, and also not latching on to how the world sees our sexuality, but just connecting to how can we fully connect to our sexuality, and how can we use it as a positive thing that we can bring into the world to cultivate more love. I hope that made sense. I know this was kind of a long-winded way of talking about a topic, but it was a trending topic that I just kind of wanted to touch on. Any further thoughts on this topic or video topic suggestions or anything, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you, and I'm always open to a respectful discussion about these issues. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up, and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you're a woman and would like to connect to her feminine energy, I have online courses. Details are in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.